There are so many new bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree, foes who drop awesome loot or simply serve to expand on this game's extensive lore. With that in mind, here's 10 bosses found in the Shadow Realm that you definitely don't want to skip, give up on, or simply miss. Let's get to it. For this first one, you can find it pretty much as soon as you come out at the Graveside Plain. Before heading north to all that main story stuff, head east into the woods, which will eventually bring you to the Church of Consolation. I covered all the loot you can get there in this video, but before arriving at the church, still within the woods themselves, we can come across Logur The Beastclaw. Now, personally, I had no trouble locating him. He literally showed up right in the center in early evening game time, but if he's not spawning for you, then maybe try returning at all different times of day. Now, judging by the name and manner of savage attack, I would guess Logur is a nod to Logan, or Wolverine. Though, defeating him and looting for ourselves his Beastclaw, it feels more accurate to call him a reference to Sabertooth, especially given the existence of other weapons in-game far more akin to Wolverine's actual claws. The Beastclaws, though, come equipped with the Savage Claws Ash of War, allowing us to pounce left and right like a beast, before finishing up with an awesome downward slash. It looks very cool, but is quite a long attack which you can still be hit during, though it's still certainly worth grabbing at the start of your adventure. As to who Logur was exactly, and why he decided to become a savage beastman of the woods, well, apparently his claws are an imitation of the esoteric technique of the Horned Warriors, who themselves would become possessed by the savagery of divine beasts to obtain battle prowess, something I suppose that Logur too was after. And he wasn't the only warrior of the Shadow Realm to choose the life of a beast. Because underneath the Shadow Altars region to the west, on the way down to Temple Town behind the two rock giants, keep an eye out for this spirit spring, which we can ride up to an additional western peninsula of the Shadow Altars. And in the middle of this place is located the northern Nameless Mausoleum, final resting place of an ancient Redmane warrior that likely at some point fought for Adan, but whose name was lost after he developed a fascination with the untainted glory of a red bear's naked strength. Having just killed one of the great red bears in a blood-soaked bout, the warrior was taken by madness, proclaiming simply, "I wish to be a bear, no more and no less." And if you've seen the movie Brother Bear, it's kind of like that, but rather than literally becoming a bear, Kanai simply decides that he now identifies as one. Fortunately for him, everybody he fought alongside seemingly didn't care what the guy, now named Red Bear, chose to be. They simply admired his strength, placing him to guard this mausoleum even in death. Red Bear will employ a string of bestial attacks and even channel the power of bear communion. Yet it's still fairly easy to defeat. Doing so will yield, first of all, his Iron Rivet armor, again a relic of the man's former life as a Redmane, but more importantly is Red Bear's Claw, which comes equipped with the Red Bear Hunt unique skill for unleashing a string of aggressive AoE attacks. More specialized, I would say, but less versatile than Logur's Beastclaws. However, this isn't the entirety of Red Bear's set, and for the incantation and pelt worn over his shoulders, we'll have to seek out two different actual Great Red Bears, perhaps descendants of the one killed by Red Bear the Man. The first, Regalia, can be found in the forest at the end of the Scorpion River Valley. Now, be sure not to miss the gloried armor set on this hillock above, dropped by a previously unsuccessful bear hunter, but defeating the bear itself will unlock the incantation Roar of Regalia, effectively the bear equivalent of Dragon Maw, releasing more AoE damage, though it's described in fact as more akin to channeling the power of divine beasts like the Hornsent than consuming the power of dragons. Finally completing the bear set then, head over to this pond at the northeastern Shadow Altars. Now again, just before the bear fight, we can find another set of Highland leather armor, but defeating the bear itself, named Ralva this time, will obtain us her pelt, worn as a headpiece to enhance the power of our bear communion incantation by 15%. Unfortunately, given that there's only one of those incantations though, you could say that the pelt of Ralva has barely any use. Still, if you wish to be a bear, no more and no less, then this should be everything you need, every boss you need to defeat for that build. Here's an enemy you probably fought against at least once, maybe even twice, but may not have completed the entire quest for. Fire Knight Queelign? Let's go with Queelign. Fire Knight Queelign is first fought in Bellarat, up these steps from the small private altar, grace site, and northeast into this courtyard where he'll invade. Really not too tough of a fight, provided we just don't let up, and defeating him the first time will yield the Crusade Insignia Talisman, depicting a raised spear on a backdrop of flames in remembrance of the lives lost in the Sacred Crusade led by Messmer, those who set aside both honor and mercy to wantonly impale and scorch those deemed impure. And it's said that those who felt invigorated by each cry of death were the same men who were certain of the sanctity of the campaign. That description tells you pretty much everything you need to know about Fire Knight Queelign as a character. He's effectively Messmer and Marika's #1 fanboy, and whilst Messmer himself may or may not have led this crusade knowing about the Hornsense atrocities inflicted on the shamans and the revenge Marika was after, I highly doubt Queelign knew about any of that, simply believing that to impale those stripped of the grace of gold is just the right thing to do. So, this talisman will boost our attack power by 15% for 20 seconds after defeating an enemy. Good for out in the world, but not so much for boss fights. But this of course isn't the end of Queelign. He will invade us again at the Church of the Crusade on Shadow Altars, and it's a little tougher this time, but listen to his dialogue if he wins.
Queen Marika, behold, I have excised another cancer to thy joy.
Yeah, this guy totally believes the crusade was led simply to make Marika happy, which to be fair isn't that far from the truth in a twisted way, though he's totally okay with doing whatever in her name. In fact, defeating him here kind of mirrors the end of the fight against Messmer, though unlike Messmer, who finally curses his mother at the very last.
Marika, a curse upon thee.
Queelign still tragically doesn't realize that he and the Fire Knights have simply been abandoned, confused at his defeat, and still begging not to be abandoned by Marika, refusing to accept the truth.
How could this be? Forsake me not. My grace.
Defeating him this time though will yield the Flame Skewer Ash of War, allowing for a strong impaling attack followed by tossing a bout of flame, and it's a great choice for fire builds. For the third and final part of the quest in fact, we can potentially get the perfect weapon to place it on. But first, you'll need to head to the church district, make your way up to the roof of the central building, and drop down onto the inner arch, and then this upper walkway with a locked door to the prayer room. Defeating Queelign both times prior will yield the prayer room key, allowing us to open the door and finally meet the man himself in the flesh.
Mother to us all, favor me with thy grace. I have met many who would threaten or distress thee, and quelled each and all, and I hereby swear to never cease. So please, grant me thy grace. Leave me with my solitary light.
Again, even in defeat, this seems to be one of the only guys in the Shadow Realm still unfailingly loyal to Marika. After all, most of the Marika statues around here have been beheaded, and now we have two choices. We can reward Queelign for his blind devotion to Marika's crusade, grant fleetingly the grace he desires, and through the salvation of that Iris of Grace, he could become our spirit summon, existing now only to wage war. Or we can let the man know that he is truly abandoned, providing an Iris of Occultation to strip his remaining grace, at which point Queelign will simp his last for Queen Marika.
I would not. Am I not pure? Defile thee I would never. I ask, why wouldst thou think to purloin from me? Deignest thou not to look upon me? All this time, I held in my heart only thee.
Yeah, this is the type of guy that would donate all of his money to Marika's OnlyFans if she had one. And looking at the design of his greatsword we can get here, it's described as having been remade in the shape of Messmer's lance, with which Queelign sought to become a second impaler, assuming, I expect, that Marika would then finally see him for the loyal soldier he is. Not realizing, of course, that Messmer, he's been abandoned for a long time too. Now, this greatsword comes with the impaling thrust skill, which can overcome enemy shields, but also goes great, I think, with the flame skewer Ash of War. But let me know in the comments what you chose, the sword or the ashes of this Simplord, Fire Knight. Just to the west of Castellensis, we can find the Fogrift Fort, something you'll ride under on your way to the Fogrift Catacombs, but which can't actually be entered until you reach the Shadow Altars. Heading to the Shadow Altars west side of Grace and dropping down here, we can enter from above the Fogrift Fort, home to a number of cool items like the Serpent Flail, found in a chest down at the very base, the Arrow's Soaring Sting Talisman, increasing the range and power of bows, found by heading around the back and to the ramparts above the western tower. But to find the additional boss of this fort, well, in my case, he actually found me, but he'll be inside that same tower that we just went behind. Black Knight Garrew is almost just your standard boss level Black Knight, albeit with one unique feature, channeling what seems like the power of the Crucible to project an elongated frog tongue incantation attack, something which he unfortunately doesn't drop after dying and which doesn't seem to crop up anywhere else in the game for us to use thus far. So if anybody has come across this incantation, then please comment below as to where, as I'm sure plenty of us would love to try it out. Though, for the time being, you'll simply have to enjoy blocking most damage using the Black Steel Great Shield, which Garrew does drop, and which comes equipped with the Shield Bash skill, serving as a symbol of the Black Knight's unyielding devotion to the Crusade, never doubting their purpose in the Shadowlands. Well, apart from the ones that did and got sealed into the catacombs, but for the most part, these guys do seem to have remained loyal to Messmer for all this time. Dryleaf Dane is one of the band of NPCs we meet across the Shadowlands, a mysterious figure belonging to a group of spiritual seekers known as the Dryleaf Sect, who are a group that values self-sufficiency and self-dependence above all else. As such, Dane does not rely on any weapon in combat, aside from his own fists, feet, and a general knowledge of martial arts, knowledge that we can learn upon defeating him. And Dane is definitely somebody that you will meet in the DLC. He is by no means hidden in that sense, but to obtain the full Dane getup for ourselves requires a few more steps and vigorous searching than the compulsory stuff. So, to trigger the first Dane encounter then, head to the northern exit of Castellensis, the High Road Cross side of Grace, picking up both the Monk's Missive and a new gesture called May the Best Man Win. And the missive will read, "Seek me to the east, if you wish to pursue the way of the warrior. When you find me, you will challenge me to a bout. There is no need for words." Yeah, Dane doesn't say a whole bunch, likely as part of his disciplinary training. And thus, to trigger the fight, head to the Morse Ruins, literally just to the east, and approach Dane with that May the Best Man Win gesture that we just picked up. This will enter us into a fight to perceive firsthand Dane's exceptional martial artwork. But overall, he's still fairly weak, so defeating him this time, he'll disappear after the fight, leaving behind the Dryleaf arts and his hat. The hat is designed to prevent Dane from meeting the gaze of others, which can throw him off, whilst the arts are effectively half the knowledge of Dane's hand-to-hand training, the practice of which is said to mark the dawn of an ascetic's training. An ascetic being somebody self-disciplined who abstains from all forms of indulgence, which also hints at the way that the Curseblade ascetic enemies would have conducted themselves. The Dryleaf arts come with the Palm Blast special attack, which I don't know about you, but I feel turns this whole thing straight into an Iron Fist build. But to get the second half of Dane's martial arts training, we'll eventually defeat him again through the main questline, unlocking Dane's footwork, a kick-based expansion of the technique which Dane developed himself by training with the aid of a waterfall, letting the water beat his body and throwing himself into its basin. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is actually the final clue to find the rest of Dane's gear, with the waterfall we want to find being along the Recluse's River Valley, the same route taken to find Rakshas's mausoleum, discussed in this video, and eventually the Abyssal Woods. Firstly though, up here, we can find the Dryleaf Seal, which enhances Miquella's incantations and explains that the Dryleaf sect began their strict faith after seeing the forthcoming weakening of order in the Erdtree's fallen leaves, and resorting to ultimately serve a new god, Miquella. The rest of Dane's clothes can be found at the base of the waterfall just below. His robe, arm wraps, and cuissards to complete any build that seeks to master the Dryleaf arts. Well, almost. It turns out, in fact, that this wasn't the only waterfall Dane trained at, and he would attain the pinnacle of his technique instead at the Rao Ruins, literally just northeast of the east site of Grace. The Dryleaf Whirlwind Ash of War is an insane attack flurry with far more stunning power than most, and is the perfect thing to apply to the footwork. Now, this one is the absolute peak of the Dryleaf arts, and if you're going to use one thing from this set, then it should be this, hands down. The Shadowkeep's Fire Knights are definitely the most annoying respawning foe around the Shadowkeep. They're tough, relentless, and their use of both ranged and melee attacks makes them irritatingly formidable. Eventually, I imagine most of us will resort to just running past these guys altogether when we see them, but there are 3 specific ones you want to make absolutely certain to defeat, for unique loot and lore on these most elite of Messmer's guards. The first can be found just between the Storehouse 7th floor and Dark Chamber entrance sites of Grace. As you're approaching the Messmer fight, this guy with a sick helmet and flaming sword will be guarding the entrance. Now, his name is Kood, captain of the Fire Knights, and upon defeat will drop the Winged Serpent Helm, token creature of Messmer's military, and enhancing our Fire Knight skills by 10%. We'll also get Kood's Ash of War, Flame Spear, for casting forward a laser-like line of flame, so make sure not to simply run past this knight if you want those. The second is known as Salza the Sage, and he'll be guarding the Rao Ruins entrance at the end of the long bridge over there. More one to lean into the fire elements of being a Fire Knight, this guy will drop the Rain of Fire incantation, a high faith spell conjuring up a cloud from which volleys of molten fire will fall. This incantation was used by Salza himself in the Crusade to burn more villages and scorch more land than any other. His hood then, which gives the impression of a greatly swollen head, will bolster our intelligence by 2, and also explains that the Crusade reached a point whereby Salza refused to burn down an old ruin at the risk of his own life. Now, I'm curious to hear which old ruin you think Salza may not have burned down. Personally, I wonder if it was the platform housing the Sealing Tree, though also looking around the general Rao Ruins, the theatre where we fight the second Dancing Lion also seems fairly intact, and of course has a dancing lion living there. Then again, someone else may just have burned the ruin anyway, so maybe there is nothing intact to find. Finally though, our third knight can be found at the base of the church district, within the big church itself. You'll first want to drain the area, taking the path south of the storehouse elevator and finding this crank to turn, after which drop down into the church to find Elder Wago, presumably the oldest of the Fire Knights, to whom Salza was a disciple, and he'll be in the midst of some fire necromancy ritual, commanding fire to take seed in a number of corpses, returning them to life of sorts, though the resurrection is merely fleeting, as no sooner than approaching us, the corpses will erupt in a fiery blast and return to nothing once again. Defeating Elder Wago will yield us his Death Mask Helm, depicting 2 faces stacked on top of each other and reducing the FP required to summon spirits by a fairly decent 12%. Like most denizens of the Shadow Realm, it appears Elder Wago was gnawed at by loneliness, perhaps having lost somebody he loved, or maybe just feeling the abandonment of Marika. So, in his loneliness, he attempted to resurrect those lost, but as we can see, sadly they brought no comfort to Wago, as the fire-fueled shells were utterly soulless. Maybe now then, he can finally gain some comfort in defeat, and we can summon potentially even more spirits, especially in builds with lower FP. There are 8 furnace golems to be fought around the Lands of Shadow, and the style of boss fight falls into 2 main categories. Either slashing at their feet on board Torrent, watching for a variety of stomp attacks, which mostly just involve jumping above the blast radius with the correct timing, or for the couple of armored golems, there'll be a nearby spirit spring to get above them and toss some hefty furnace or fire pots to inflict damage that way. But one of these 8 golems is far less obvious than the rest, and it can be found down in the ruins of Unte, the main watery area we'll come out at after using the stone coffin in the Shadowkeep. Now, there'll be a golem roaming around here already, but it's not that one. In fact, it may be worth defeating that one first, so as to avoid fighting 2 at the same time. That one will drop the oil-soaked tier, soaking enemies in oil for greater fire damage susceptibility. After doing that though, head over to the actual ruins, which we can't get inside due to a dead, or actually dormant, golem. And riding up to the building opposite, we can actually reawaken this guy with, again, the use of a hefty furnace pot. With this one up, we can not only defeat it for an additional physic tier, but we can also get inside the church, or whatever these ruins are, to obtain the giant golden arc incantation and one of the 3 altars relating to the Sword of Light and Darkness, which I discuss in more detail in a timestamp of this video. As for the tier dropped by this golem, you'll want to use this one very carefully. The blood-sucking cracked tier will, for 3 minutes, bolster the damage of our attacks by 1.2, though it does so by slowly draining our own HP, which, if you don't keep an eye on, can wind up in straight-up death. It's good in quicker fights where you'll likely have to heal up a few times anyway, but for the longer ones, the additional damage may be offset by the additional Crimson Tier flasks we have to consume. Still, this whole event is definitely worth doing, and it's all too easy to dismiss this golem as simply dead before riding on. Down at the Cerulean coast, towards the western end, is an island which at first seems inaccessible, and to get to it, you'll want to ride towards this dead tree, where a cemetery shade will spawn, and you can loot the Gravekeeper's cookbook. Then, coming to this edge, you should notice an additional patch of land further down. This will actually lead us into a hidden tunnel, inhabited by exploding versions of the spectral worm guys, and which can bring us out in 2 new locations. Now, traveling north will bring us out to this stone coffin, to obtain a Great Grave Glovewort, try saying that out loud, and the southern pass will of course bring us out onto the island below, containing the Southern Nameless Mausoleum. Again, home to a spirit whose name is lost to history, and this one is referred to as the Dancer of Ranah, a warrior whose attacks literally follow a relentless swirling dance pattern, though one who's fairly easy to defeat with continuous use of strong attacks. Doing so will teach us a little more about these dancers from a far-off land, describing how their dance is one of burning passion, with the most passionate never allowing for their fiery dance to end, dancing on until even their names are lost. Well, now we know how this warrior became nameless. Not through want to become a bear this time, but rather to dance forever, and the dancing blades of Ranah will allow us to take up this dance for ourselves, with a full outfit enhancing our attacks with it by an additional 10%. The unending dance skill on this weapon is an awesome unique power, which provided we've stamina and FP, really will never end. Well, unless we get hit. But provided that's not the case, this can be a very quick and effective way to end certain foes. Though using the blades outside of this skill makes them a little less incredible. To accompany this boss's build though, make sure not to miss the perfumed oil of Ranah, back outside still on the island on the northern point here. A flame-spouting flourish, which at the cost of more FP, can provide a complementary attack to our arsenal. This one can be found at, or rather under, the northern part of the Dio Finger Ruins. So, starting from the Fingerstone Hill side of Grace, you'll want to head down into the ruins, and if you haven't defeated the Falling Star Beast just north of here, then I recommend doing that first to anyone who missed it for the Gravitational Missile spell. Though, the boss far easier to miss around here though, is instead a little ways southeast, down a pretty obscure hole underground, into an at first seemingly empty cave. cave, within which will be the Finger Creeper ashes, laying in a trap guarded by a ginormous Finger Creeper. And in fairness, you can actually just grab the ashes here and leave. Defeating the creeper doesn't yield anything extra, save for 14,000 runes, but given it's too big to fit through the cave exit, you may as well just cheese the thing anyway. Given the 1 or at most 2 times you'll probably have reason to come to these ruins overall though, just make sure not to miss this one. It's not the best ash for supporting in attacks, but as a young thing dedicated to its mother, that's us, don't tell Ymir, it will cast heal spells which can be useful, especially in closer fights where you'll be split up less. This last one is a pretty unique boss, but utterly brilliant in both design and rewards. In the northwestern end of Charo's hidden grave, tucked away at the back, is a dungeon. One of the several jails built by the Hornset, it seems, to house, among other things, the abomination results of Shaman Jar rituals, some of whom can even be fought in a large cistern room, home to mountains of bodies and literal rivers of blood. Something awful happened down here, and perhaps it had something to do with the prisoner in the deepest part of the jail, something the people of the tower were desperate to hide from the world. Lamenter is a form of omen, though one even more besotted with horns than most of the Crucible-blessed people we've seen. With wails of lamentation, he will cast ranged attacks at us and duplicate himself multiple times over. And I guess that's how the other bosses feel when having to fight a mimic.
Use my own spells against me.
I mean, in fairness, the copies do go down in like one hit, but are still overwhelming in force. Defeating Lamenter though will yield us his mask, and this works in a similar way to the 2 dragon transformation hearts. Only with this one, we ourselves will become a Lamenter, improving all of our resistances, especially to holy damage, and bolstering our arcane by 8. Easily the best thing about it though, is that by using the item again after transformed, we can bonk people with a massively enlarged head as many times as we like. If you thought that Dane's setup was cool and unique, then I think this is even more so. Towards the upper part of the dungeon though, we can also pick up the Lamenting Visage Torch, a naturally fitting weapon to go with this getup, which is literally another lamenting head, which with a cry can make us less detectable to enemies. There's also a lamenting prattling pate down here, but as far as anyone can tell, this has no quest-based utility. So what does this all mean? What is a Lamenter, and why did the tower hate them? Well, according to the mask, this transformation tallies with the state of a denizen of paradise, but the people of the tower denied and hid it from the world. In their foolishness, they viewed true bliss with deep fear. So to lament means to display a passionate expression of grief, wailing in the way one would when hearing somebody's just died, and the mask appears to imply that remaining in this state of intense emotion, one actually achieves a sense of true bliss. The inability to focus beyond one's own grief blinds them to the world, a state reflected literally by the horns grown into Lamenter's eyes. The lamenting visage then depicts the same face minus the horns, the eyes instead now beaming out a vacant light of an oddly reminiscent colour. The unusual expression somehow imparts a sense of contentment, the languid ease of one who needs not sight. Again, by remaining in this state of lamentation, one can and will not look beyond their emotional state, remaining ignorant to all exterior goings-on, with ignorance of course being bliss. It's an interesting thought to imagine what would happen if you could remain fixed in a deep, highly emotional state beyond cohesive thought forever. Terrifying to think about, of course, but I guess that's the point. That burden of thinking would get removed. And I imagine if this state of being had become prevalent across Hornsent society, it would have ultimately caused its collapse. The whole thing, from the deep fear of the Hornsent right down to the very colour of the visage's eyes, feels extremely reminiscent in fact of another threat that the Hornsent went to deep lengths to contain. Deep in the abyssal woods, Midra too can be found enduring a state of eternal suffering. And just as the mask describes the Hornsent as foolish, Midra says the same to us.
The depths of your foolishness!
So perhaps the whole reason that Midra is doing this isn't necessarily to keep the frenzied flame at bay, but to endure a state of suffering long enough as to himself achieve a state of true bliss. Perhaps only then he could give in to the flame's true power, and perhaps it's the same case with Lamenter, channeling a very similar chaotic primordial force. But of course, this is becoming mostly speculative, and if you are interested in learning more, then I have a bigger chapter on Midra in my video explaining all 11 of the main Remembrance bosses. So comment below your thoughts and theories on Lamenter, and maybe together we can draw some more concrete conclusions. Hopefully you found this video useful. If not interesting, likes are always greatly appreciated if you did. Subscribe for more Elden Ring and other games I cover on the channel. Massive thank you, as always, of course, to the patrons who help me to keep making content like this. Thank you for watching. I'm Sam Bram, and have a great day.